Laisha's in the house.
Yes.
I actually said your name right.
You did.
People must get it like mixed up all the time.
All the time. I'm very surprised when somebody actually gets it right.
What does your name mean?
I think it means prosperous or abundance or something. I looked it up before.
Okay.
Something like that. My mom just apparently heard it on TV once and she liked it and just named me Laisha.
And that was it.
Yeah.
See, I was calling you Laisha, so I'm sorry.
I don't mind Laisha. Like it, honestly, if you Laisha, it looks like Laisha.
Yeah. What's your full name?
Laisha Martinez. I don't have a middle name.
No middle name.
Yeah.
Mine's Victoria.
Nice.
So it's super snobby name. Jennifer Victoria Leone.
Leone. Italian.
Jennifer is like when I was in trouble.
Yeah.
My mom would be like, Jennifer. And if I was like in big trouble, it's like, Jennifer Victoria.
Yeah. My mom just said, Laisha.
But Laisha's here with Fuck the Stigma.
Yeah, so Fuck the Stigma. I'm Fuck the Stigma representing.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's your podcast.
Our podcast.
Yes.
Well, my podcast, my nonprofit. Well, I don't like to call it mine.
Okay.
It feels weird, but it is the nonprofit that I work for. And we have a podcast, and that's the main way that we go about breaking the stigma with like having that conversation that people don't really want to have, talking about those uncomfortable things, getting in the nitty and gritty about substance use and mental health, and we cover a lot of other things on the podcast.
Yeah. So Fuck the Stigma. How did you guys come up with that? You know, what was that conversation like?
So, I mean, I started working for it when I was 19 years old.
Okay. How old are you now?
20.
Okay.
I'm 20 years old now.
You're a baby.
I am. And I want to talk a little bit about that as well.
Okay.
So I got the opportunity. So the guy who founded it was Robbie Stempler. He's made great improvements in the treatment industry.
Nice.
And I met him through the treatment center I went through. Okay. And he kind of just like he saw me. I had a little knack for making videos a little bit. And he was just like, what do you think about this nonprofit? I would love for you to run it, to put all of your creative juices and just put this message out there in the world, and I want you to do it. And I was like,
nice.
Why not? You know, it was my way out of the food service industry, and I was like, please.
Yeah.
Another thing is like most of the kids my age are in college or like have this big idea of like, oh, I'm going to be a doctor, I want to be a lawyer. And that's like a self stigma I put on myself of like, I am a recovering addict and I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. So I felt kind of like slightly like a failure and had no direction at all. And I feel like this is something I'm like, Fuck the Stigma, something I'm very passionate about, and it speaks true to my heart. Yeah. So it was like a perfect opportunity, and I took it and I've run with it. Yeah. I've been doing it for a year now. I'm like a year and 2 months maybe. Right. And it's grown a lot, and I've grown a lot through the journey.
Like what have you learned the most about yourself over this past year?
Oh my gosh. I've learned a lot about like I learn a lot about different things. So I have people come on that like we've done like 50 some episodes now, and I've learned a lot about other people's stories with their mental health journey and acknowledging it and accepting it. And I feel like I've learned how to be there for people this past year, listening to others, how to be a really good listener.
Yeah. Because don't you think a lot of times, and it's at no fault of the person, but we're always like listening to respond. Yes. You know what I mean? Like, oh, what am I going to say? Yes. Instead of just listening.
Exactly that. Yeah. We're always, because it's kind of like an anxiety thing a little bit. Yeah. Right? Trying to figure out how we're coming across to the person. Like just trying to really figure out what we're going to say to people so we look good, maybe. Yeah.
We need to get out of self. I used to do that all the time when I'd go to meetings, and I would like ruin the whole meeting when I was in early recovery for myself. Because I would just sit there obsessing on, oh my God, if they call on me, what am I going to say? Or should I share? My sponsor says, hands up, I'm alive, hand down, I'm dead. What am I going to say? And then the meeting's over and I like didn't hear anything.
Exactly.
I was like so absorbed in self, you know?
Yes. Very self-centered and selfish. Yes.
And so what have you learned the most about other people?
About other people? I'm somebody who, like, for example, like in my addiction, it was kind of isolated and very depressing. So I feel like I kind of haven't really lived life. I only started like learning and being present in the world only 2 years ago. So like I've learned a lot about what being homeless is like. You know what I mean? I was very uninformed on that. I've experienced grief and I've been through grief, but I didn't know how to identify that. You know, I've learned of like what PTSD can be like for other people. Yeah, a lot of different perspectives.
Yeah.
I've gotten to see, and something I really try to do is be very unbiased and neutral in things, but obviously I might be leaning more towards another side, but I'm also very young and impressionable. So I try and soak in everything.
Yeah.
All the different opinions and ideologies, and like see where I feel like I agree.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So you got sober at 18?
Yes.
Wow.
I was like pretty fresh at 18. I had graduated high school, and then like 2 months later, I came out to California. I grew up in North Carolina.
Okay.
Pretty rural town, Winston-Salem.
Uh-huh.
It's literally only known for like cigarette production. I think we have an art school that Jada Pinkett Smith went to.
Okay. Well, that's cool.
That's one cool fact.
What was your childhood like?
Okay, so my parents, I'm like first generation like American. So my parents, I think that makes sense. Like my parents are both from the Dominican Republic.
Okay.
And they met in Providence, Rhode Island. That's where I was born. We moved to North Carolina to kind of get away from my dad. My mom, it was kind of, he used substances, and he was kind of, didn't behave in the best ways. So we moved down to North Carolina when I was about 4 or 5, and just tried to like start a life out there with my brother. And he ended up coming back down. So I did grow up with like basically two parents my whole life, and an older brother, 4 years older. And it was, I had a roof over my head. I had food on the table, but there was no emotional support. There was domestic violence. One of like my earliest traumas. I mean, I'll be very transparent, open, and vulnerable here, because that's what I do. That's what I try and do on like our own platform. Is like one of my earliest traumas is my mom laying on the floor with my dad on top of her with a knife to her throat. Wow. And they're telling me, a 4 or 5 year old, to like call the police. And I don't remember what happened after. I mean, I asked my brother about it, actually not too long ago, a few months ago. Apparently I did call the police, but I don't remember. I blacked out. I don't remember what happened, but apparently the police came, and there was like a police report or something. But things like that. I remember my dad he's diagnosed bipolar. So, and he was smoking weed, and if you smoke weed and you're bipolar, there can be anger outbursts. Okay. And typically for very stupid things. So there was just random, like if you didn't turn off his coffee in time, like he was going to throw sugar everywhere and threaten to leave and throw clothes everywhere and things like that.
So you're walking on eggshells pretty much.
Yes. And it wasn't like an everyday thing of I'm scared for my life every day. It was so random. Yeah.
So when did you first start experimenting with drugs?
So around when I was 14 is when I started experimenting with drugs. I remember finding my dad's weed one day, and I remember the anger I felt. I was like, I'll never touch that, you know?
Yeah.
And I was like kind of resentful towards it a little bit, and I felt I didn't know how to like think about it, but it just didn't feel right. It didn't feel good. I was like, this is bad. I correlated it with drugs bad, of course. And of course, I grew up with the DARE program in school, and the really shitty videos of like how drugs affect your brain, and then how you should look for natural highs and things like that. It didn't stick in, but I remember it. And so around when I was in 9th grade, I started off with like nicotine. My brother showed me what a vape was, and I remember coughing my lungs out. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I'll definitely do that again, right?
Right. Why not?
Yeah. And keep in mind, like I don't know who I am. I'm very anxious. I don't know how to express myself. I don't know how to talk about feelings. There was no in-depth conversation in my household. It felt like my brother was the one who raised me, who taught me how to do things, who helped me with my homework. My parents were always working, trying to we were trying to get by. Yeah. And even growing up, we were always at babysitters. Like my parents, they were there, but like not there at the same time. I didn't really feel like they were too present. And I never knew who to go to in like times of distress. Me and my brother always fought, of course, but it was like pretty bad fighting. It was just like somebody ended up bleeding at the end of it. You know what I mean? And when I was in 9th grade, my brother actually ended up giving me weed for the first time. He rolled the joint and everything, and then you're sitting there trying to figure out how to smoke it the right way. And I was like, yep. I felt all giggly and giddy, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do that again.
Yeah.
And then it was for me, it was like a slow progression with those first 2 years. It was just smoking more consistently. I got my first job. And also speaking about stigma, so my freshman year, I was in this high school that was in the more rural side of North Carolina, and I hated it. I thought I was going home crying every day. I was trying to like call my dad to like pick me up early from school or something. Like any way to get out of class or just not to be there, just so I can go home and cry myself to sleep. That was my day.
Yeah. And why were you crying from the school?
I felt this is the self stigma I was experiencing. I just felt so out of place.
Got it.
I was like, I don't look like these kids at
Don't
school.
belong.
I was ashamed of my culture. At this point, my Spanish is dying down because I wanted to be like everybody that I was around. I wanted to have the straight hair, the pale skin. I wanted to mainly, only speak English. I started responding to my parents in English only. And I don't know, I just wanted to be like those people. Nobody ever told me like, Laisha, your curly hair is ugly or whatever. It was just me. That was my like perception, the self-stigma. Nobody's telling me that I'm weird. It's just that's how I'm perceiving myself. I mean, there was a few kids that made fun of my Spanish because it started going away, like the accent. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was just really depressed, and I didn't know that I was experiencing depression until I looked back in hindsight.
Yeah.
And then I smoked weed. So I ended up going to I transferred to a different high school, and that's when it was like a school downtown, so like whole different variety of kids.
Yeah.
A lot of diversity and a lot of different people. And then I found alcohol. They were like, hey, we do this thing called getting drunk. How about you join us? And I remember the first time I got drunk, I stole my brother's car. I didn't have a license at this point. We went to a Sheetz, which is like this 24-hour gas station on the East Coast. Shoved a bunch of Four Locos and Strawberries down my pants. Went home, and I blacked out. I got blacked out drunk.
Wow,
and
the first time.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just kept drinking and drinking. It tasted like juice to me at the time. And I was in love. It wasn't like, I just really liked it, and I knew I was going to do it again, just like with the weed, just like with the nicotine. It's like, why not? This feels really good. I felt like I could express myself like how I always wanted to. I could tell people I love them. I could tell people how I really felt about them. I felt I felt warm and fuzzy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I was hooked on it. And then it became like every other weekend thing. And then obviously I'm a minor, so I always have to steal it. And there was a rush even in itself with the stealing. You know what I mean? I felt like I was really feeling things again.
Yeah.
And from there, like a year of like drinking and smoking, then I found my drug of choice, which was Xanax.
Okay.
And at that time I was going through something. It was like kind of like a friend breakup thing. And I just felt really alone. I was like, oh, my one friend, like I have nobody right now. And I just felt really down in the dumps. And then I took this pill. I took it on a whim. I was like, why not? I'll take half this pill. And I blacked out that day and somehow managed to wake up home in my bed. And I was like, this is amazing. I don't remember my whole day, and I get to just wake up in my bed just to do it all over again. This is great. I fell in love with avoidance and disassociating and not being present.
Yeah.
And yeah, I fell in love with that. That was my life for 2 years, was blackouts.
Wow.
And some like, little flashes of memory in that time. And this is street Xanax. So was I really taking Xanax? I don't know, but that's what was on the pill.
Well, that's what's so terrifying. I mean, you're obviously meant to be here to spread the message, help others, in your life that you're building for yourself, because in all accounts, you should be dead.
Yeah.
Like if that was around when I was, still in my addiction, I'd be dead for sure, because I was buying so much off the streets. So thank God, you were meant to be here. And so when you were getting like blackout, wasted all the time, you liked that. Like there wasn't anything in your head at that time telling you like, this is bad.
Yeah.
I shouldn't be doing that. There was no rational thoughts.
No, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Like no memory of that day, but I had like videos and I was like, wow, it looks like I was having a great time. And also another thing I think I fell in love with was like delusion, being delusional was like, oh, I could I could just make up whatever happened today. Like, oh yeah, I had a great time yesterday, but I don't really know that.
Yeah. So you were living in a false sense of reality.
Yes.
Completely.
It was just everything was a fucking lie.
Yeah. And so did your family know? I mean, what happened?
So there was like times where like I had a doctor's appointment. My mom would try to pick me up from school and I was like an hour and a half away at this airport. And she was like, where is my kid? Like she's supposed to be in school right now. Like things like that would happen where it's like, where is she? Why is she not coming home? They started like getting annoyed and like blowing up my phone. Like, where are you? Why are you always out on the streets? They would say stuff like that. Like I'm a street rat or like you just want to be on the streets all the time.
Yeah.
And, so they were kind of concerned. They were definitely concerned, but I didn't care. And I wasn't like there enough mentally to really be aware that they cared or yeah. So
how'd you finally get sober?
So it's like my addiction was kind of short and sweet, the span of it. So, I got 3 DUIs in the time span of 11 months.
Wow.
So yeah, I started off with little fender benders. Like, oh, I didn't realize I was rolling. I was always driving under the influence. That was the main thing we did. Like, it's rural North Carolina. There's nothing to do but to drive around, sit at parks, and do nothing. You know what I mean? So I was always behind the wheel, and I got my first DUI of July 2020, and that was also like COVID hit when I was in high school. So I didn't have those last 2 years of high school. They were all virtual. So I wasn't attending those, obviously.
Yeah.
And, I got my first DUI. And then a few months later, January 2021, got my second DUI. I was driving and on the highway, hit this, like the cement thing that separates the other lanes. I hit that. It started turning and then boom, I hit that. And I was so confused and like trying to, like my nose is bleeding and my car is totaled, but I'm like, do I think I can drive away from this? You know what I mean? Yeah. Like I was never the one to call the cops. I had this whole thing of like, I don't really like cops because they're bad. I'm doing bad things. So they're the bad guys.
Right.
Of course. And then, yeah, so I got hospitalized that night, but it wasn't anything bad. I got my second DUI and I was unaware that I got my second DUI because I didn't know what was really happening.
Yeah.
So then I was sleeping in a McDonald's parking lot one night and cops broke through my window and arrested me. And I was so confused. And apparently I had a warrant for my arrest because I didn't show up to court for my DUI. Like I was just really not there at all. I was cheating on people, lying, having sex for drugs, doing really weird things that some of the things I don't remember. Some things like I only know because other people told me I did that. There was like no care for my body, for my life. I was just doing things and was completely unaware. And then I got my third DUI in July 2021. And that night it was like 2 a.m. and I was just stopped at a red light behind the wheel. And that somehow I just had my foot on the brake.
Wow.
And that was like my bottom that they talk about. I woke up in jail. I thought I was going to wake up in my bed, of course, because I usually wake up in bed somehow. But no, this time I wake up in a jail cell and I'm like pissed. I'm like, how did I do this again? This is like my third time in jail. How did this happen? And it just felt different this time. It really did. Like this was the first time I ever truly felt suicidal. This time I was like, no, I'm done. Like Xanax is the issue. I'm done. Like I'm never doing this again. And my mom told me she wasn't going to bail me out of jail anymore. And all these things, so many things were going through my head. And I just like was just hitting my head up against like the cement wall and all kinds of shit. And my brother ended up being the one to bail me out. And that's when I knew something had to change, but I didn't know what. I thought, okay, the Xanax is the issue. I'll stop doing Xanax. And then my lawyer told me like, dude, I don't know how you managed to get 3 DUIs, but the only thing that's going to make this look good is if you go to treatment. So
and did you know what treatment was? I mean,
no, I've never heard of recovery, rehab. The only thing that the only way I've seen rehab is like on TV, like on Shameless or something, or like AA on Shameless. Yeah. Like the TV show, and only in media. And even like media doesn't portray it well, I think, or accurately.
Right.
And yeah, so I went to treatment because my lawyer suggested it. And of course I had a stigma against treatment and addicts. and alcoholics. Like,
And you
I was
weren't
like,
identifying as one, right?
of course not.
Yeah.
No, I was like, that's not me. I could obviously, I just like doing this.
Right. I'm just having fun. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's another thing with getting young sober. It's like, I'm just having fun. I'm just being a kid.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I was really offended that he asked me to look into treatment centers. I was really offended. I cried after that meeting. And I thought we kind of just forgot about that conversation. My thing is disassociating, avoiding. So I just forgot about that conversation. Like, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
And then my mom ended up making the calls. And then a few weeks later, I'm out coming on an airplane to California. And then I go to Malibu. I do a 45-day treatment center. And then I do intensive outpatient afterwards. And like, this was huge for me. Because now, for the first time in like 3-4 years, I'm present and I'm conscious.
Walk us through that process, especially for young people out there, that are trying to get sober. They maybe lived in areas like you lived in that don't understand it at all, and they're terrified and they have those stigmas. Like, what was that process like from getting on that plane to going to detox to going to outpatient?
Okay. So where my mindset was with it is I just graduated high school. I don't plan on going to college, so I have nothing else better to do with my time. Like, why not just go to California for 45 days? Like, I've always wanted to go. Let's go check it out.
Vacation.
Right? So that's why I was so willing to go, because I had nothing else planned for myself. So I had that kind of advantage a little bit. Some people are much more hesitant because they have other things going on. Like, some people have kids, but so I came out here. Obviously I had the intention of just going straight back home and then smoking weed and still drinking, because weed and drinking is very socially acceptable, not the Xanax or the Coke or anything else, right? So I got there, and I'm the youngest person in the treatment center I'm at, of course. And I actually went in with a very open mind and ears. I had my ears open. It's like, why not? Like, I'm very young. Like, that's when I knew that's when, like, me being so young, it really hit. I'm like, I don't have the things, like the terms and things people are like saying. I'm like, what is that? Like, I'm like a sponge right now. Like, I'm learning all these different things. And like,
like you're in school for recovery.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what actually, like, people have told me, like, this recovery is your school. Like, you're honestly having an advantage. You're learning how to live life that most people don't get at this age. So so they were, first of all, they were telling me I was an addict and alcoholic. I was like, I don't know about that part. Like, I think I was only doing it because I was always with this friend who was always doing it. It's just like peer pressure, or that's just the people I was hanging out around. And that was the really hard. It took me like probably the majority of the time I was in treatment to come to terms I was an addict and alcoholic. It's like, we don't like that label, the stigma surrounding it, because we have this idea of like an addict is the homeless person on the side of the street, or the person banging on the drug dealer's door to like front them something. So it was really hard for me to identify, because I saw addicts as a certain type of way. But if I really look at my experience, I was doing Xanax every day. I think a person who isn't an addict or an alcoholic wouldn't do that. Wanting to black out every day, and is okay with that. Having the consequences, one DUI, you know what I mean? And then going back again and getting a second one. Like, you'd think you would just not drink and drive again. It's kind of just like almost slightly like a common sense thing. Like, I think some, like a normal person who can maybe drink normally they would just learn from the consequences.
Your life became unmanageable.
Yes.
There was no way, and you couldn't stop.
Yes. And also another thing, learning that like I still don't make sane decisions sober sometimes. Like, I need to run things by people.
I was like that for like the first 5 years.
Exactly. Yeah. So coming to terms with that, and then looking at my experiences, like, I just started crying. There was random days where I was just crying and bawling, and I didn't understand why.
Because you're feeling things for the first time in forever.
Everything I've been suppressing since childhood is coming up, because I had my coping mechanisms when I was a kid. Yeah. Of course. And like, that was like shoving them down. And then the drugs and alcohol was extra shoving them down. And now I'm feeling things that I've never felt before. This is the first time in my life I'm getting therapy. This is the first time in my life, like, I'm acknowledging where my mental health is. Yeah. Like, that was all new to me. My parents didn't talk about that stuff. Like, I remember growing up, my brother had suicide attempts, and like we kind of just didn't talk about it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I visited my brother in like psychiatric hospitals, and we didn't really have that conversation. I remember visiting him, and we were just like having like a normal conversation. Like, this isn't where he is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was just so, why weren't we talking about these things?
Yeah.
And that's why I'm so passionate about talking it with Fuck the Stigma, because fuck the stigma on mental health. Why aren't we having this conversation?
Because the conversation is healing.
Yeah.
You know, being able to let it all out, connect with others and feel those things and be relatable, like that heals. Like I didn't feel for so long either because I was taking massive amounts of Xanax too. Plus, you know, from my childhood trauma, your body like protects you in your mind and it blocks out like gaps of time. So I didn't remember a lot of stuff either. And same thing, like when I got into recovery, it was like all of a sudden I'm feeling everything and I'm remembering everything. And as beautiful as it was really tough too, because you're like a pincushion, like everything's new. But talking about it, there's so much power in that.
100%.
Yeah. So when did you realize that you were going to stay longer than 45 days?
When I was actually in treatment, I remember a technician was driving us to a meeting. And we were just sitting at like Topanga Canyon and the PCH at the light. And you could just see the beautiful ocean, the Pacific Ocean. It was like the sun was setting. It was gorgeous. And I was like, I don't know about this whole like sober living. What is that? She was like, you could just stay in California. I was like, what? That's an option? Like I could stay out here and like keep doing recovery and like kind of start a new life and not go back to the toxic environment I was in before. So that's when like that seed was planted, and I kind of started just like running with that, and it just sounded like a great idea. I started asking the case managers, the therapists, if they thought that was cool. They're like, yeah, that'd be very beneficial for you, especially being so young.
Yeah.
You think you can just go back to...
Well, especially the town that you're from doesn't sound like there was any real recovery there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Never heard of it.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, and then there's this whole process of forgiving myself for my past actions. But that's kind of like when I love the word amen, and like that we talked about that in the 12 steps. Like the forgiveness becomes easier when like you won't do it again because of this amends process. It's like really changing that behavior. So yeah, there was so much grieving. And I was actually like, I started getting excited for it because I was so ready for change. And I came to the realization that I don't have the best ideas. You know what I mean? So I was like, okay, I'm down with the idea of you telling me what to do, how to manage my life, how to run my life, how to make better decisions, how to improve, how to maybe succeed in the world. But it's been this whole process. Like a big thing for me was I didn't acknowledge my trauma because I was comparing my trauma to everybody else's. I never knew I'd experienced trauma or like identified with it, because I'm like, dude, people have been through so much worse.
Yeah.
People have been shot, or there's a lot of worse things. You know what I mean? I was just like, my life was much more simple.
Yeah. And
I had it easy.
What did you do to get to that point of not comparing yourself to others and being comfortable in your own skin?
I got to a point where I realized that my experience was valid and it's true to me. And that it's affected me in the way that it has. You know what I mean? Like, just because somebody went through something doesn't make your experience any more or less like valid or true to you.
Yeah. One person's experience is, completely different. I remember this one girl one time, she had told me, this was many years ago, and she was like, oh, I've just had the worst day ever, right? And was like having a complete breakdown. And I'm thinking like, oh my God, like what just happened to her? You know, because thinking of what my trauma would be, for me to say that would have to be something like horrific, right? She's like, I got a speeding ticket. And I was like, oh my God. But now I can like step out of self, and go, oh yeah, like what one person's reality is completely different to my reality. Yeah. So in these last 2 years, what has that healing process looked like between you and your family?
Oof.
Because that's the thing too, like we get sober and a lot of times like we do the work and maybe our families don't do the work, or vice versa, where we get sober and then we're like, we're better, and they need that like time and reassurance and the consistency and to build the trust. So it can be so many different factors. Like what did it look like for you guys?
100%. Well, what was crazy, in my first few months of being sober, my dad actually apologized for like the most recent time he had like laid hands on me.
Wow.
It was really crazy. He like, it was a phone call, which I actually appreciated. He called me. He was like, I'm really sorry for for that one time in your bedroom where I was asking you for your keys, for your car keys. He was like, I really did not mean for it to get to that point. I was like, wow, I was speechless. And yeah, I remember he came to my room asking me for my car keys, of course, because my car is an issue with me and my addiction. And I refused to give it to him. He left my room. I like hid them under like my pillow or something. And he came back in and like body slammed me on the floor.
Oh, wow.
And I remember, of course, my way of coping with that at the time, I just left and went and got high. But that was the last time he laid hands on me. And I was very resentful. You know what I mean? Like I had a pin in my head. Like I also feel like that's a big reason why I have a weird relationship with men nowadays. So I think like my experiences with my father do still affect me to this day, very, very much so. But my overall relationship with my family is better, but I'm not completely there yet. Honestly, they don't even know half of what my life has been the past 2 years. They probably know like 10% of it. I don't talk to them that much about anything really deep. There is a lot of improvement there, but I think they trust me. I think there's trust there. And I think that the space between us, of me being on the opposite side of the country, is really good for us right now.
Yeah.
But I do plan on possibly going home for the holidays, and that's something I'm kind of dreading.
And that'll be the first time.
That'll be the third time.
The third time, okay.
Like the past, so I visited twice since I've been out here. And the last time, there was like arguments, you know what I mean? It's just, I didn't like it.
Yeah, and that's why I was saying, like, we can get into recovery and do the work and go to therapy and do all these things, but to talk about and deal with people that aren't doing the work.
Exactly. That's,
you know, so it's like, how do we deal with that, right? And so like being able to protect ourselves in that space, have our boundaries, you know our exit plans if we need to get out of those situations. What are your suggestions to people that are watching that are going home for the first time after getting sober?
I think a lot of patience. Patience is really, it's a big one because we're now living by principles and most people aren't. I think a lot of just your everyday people could benefit from the 12 steps or a program or being in recovery.
I think everyone should do them just to do them.
Yeah. Right. And I think patience is a big one. And like, I think emotional regulation, you know what I mean? Like, say somebody gets heated about something very little, like it's just like, okay, let's be patient. Let's be patient and like give them that time to feel that feeling.
Pause.
Yeah, a good pause.
Art of pausing.
Yes.
Yeah. I had to do that too. Like pause, don't react.
Exactly.
Because that was a big thing for me. I would just like pop off and react, emotionally react. When I was in treatment, they'd always say, Jenny, just go sit on your hands. Like 30 times a day, I'd literally just go and like sit on my hands until they would tell me I could come out. Because we can just react in the moment. Being a young person in recovery, how do you have sober fun? Because a lot of people, when they're young, they're terrified to get sober because they're like, what, I'm just never going to drink again? Like, how am I going to go and do anything fun? Like, my life is over.
That was a big thought in my head when I first got sober. It's like, what is the fun now? Where is it? I think my life is over.
Yeah.
And I have so much fun. The most fun I've ever had in my life is the past 2 years. I go to a lot of shows and raves, and I know that's weird because there's a lot of drug use at places like that, but it's also, when I go, it's a huge reminder of like why I don't want to touch substances again.
Yeah. And do you go with like a sober crew?
Yes,
and
I
you're
do.
Accountable to somebody when you go?
100%. I never go alone. And I usually go with my like sober trudging buddies, of course.
Nice.
I usually recommend going to shows, like especially raves, with people. But it's funny because you see everybody there like out of control, like fucked up, like falling on the floor, bumping into people, and they're just not there.
Yeah.
They're not there. Like, are you even enjoying the music at that point?
Right.
You know what I mean? So I'm like, wow, I'm so glad I'm sober. It's also a good reminder when I go to places like that.
You're grateful.
Yes.
And you've also been able to find your passion and your purpose through speaking and, you know, having the Fuck the Stigma, because that's another thing. Like, I always preach that you can get sober, but if you don't find what you're passionate about, if you don't find what drives you, what gives you that worth, you know, what makes it worthwhile to do it, then you're just going to be white knuckling it and then you're going to relapse. So for you, you found that.
Yes.
How do you find at your age hobbies and things that you like to do?
So, I mean, I always had an interest for video and film. Like, I was like, oh, making movies would be so cool. but when I got sober, I actually had the opportunity to pick up a camera and really, you know, express myself creatively behind the camera. And now with Fuck the Stigma in front of the camera as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I first got sober, I started making music videos for one of my really good friends I met in treatment, actually.
Cool.
And that was so much fun because you can
Nice.
just fuck around and just have like do whatever you want to do. Like, oh, this shot would be cool. So that was I'm so glad I got to find my passion.
Yeah.
With like photography and videography and sobriety. But it's just really just try a bunch of new things. Like I've done so many things. Like I've roller skated.
Just go out.
Yeah, just go out and do things. And I've met so many cool people that can show me to new things. Yeah, like tagging. So there's a big stigma with like graffiti artists. And I got to try that out. You know what I mean? Like there's places where it's legal to graffiti.
Okay.
So like trying that out. I've picked up painting. Yeah, a lot of different things you can go ahead and try.
Very cool. I'm so stoked for you because when I was your age, I did not think I had a problem. I didn't even think I had a problem until like my mid 30s. I was like, I'm good.
Yeah.
So for you to figure this out now and be as creative as you are, to be helping others, to start getting this like good understanding of yourself and get yourself planted. I mean, you've got so much ahead of you.
Yeah.
You're going to just help so many people. So
I'm very, very grateful for it. And I really do want to be an example that you can get young sober.
Right.
And it is not the end of your life.
Yes. Like what would you say? Final thoughts to youngsters out there that are on the fence. What would you say?
So for young people that are even thinking about getting sober or it's looking like it's about time to get sober, I think this could be a very huge start for you, for your future, for really finding out who you are and who you want to be in the world. And I think it can provide a huge opportunity for growth and improvement.
Yes.
And like your life can start now, not like in 20 years.
Yeah.
It's just the beginning. I've had the best time of my life in the past years of being sober and in recovery.
Amazing.
And like, you know, fuck the stigma on substance use, on mental health. Like talk about that.
Yeah. Fuck that stigma. How can people find Fuck the Stigma?
So you can find Fuck the Stigma our website, www.fthestigma.com.
Okay.
We're on YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram.
Nice.
Twitter, which is now X, I guess. So yeah, and it's honestly Fuck the Stigma is just I want this to be a huge community of people who are like-minded and just like and wanting to have conversations about mental health, substance abuse, and all those stigmatized topics.
Yeah,
you know, like this past weekend we went to the Shatterproof Walk, like raising vital funds to transform how addiction is treated in America. I've been going to speak at high schools, like telling people in high schools like, hey, this is what mental health is. And like you can talk about it.
Yeah.
Like what's been your experience with it? Like starting that conversation.
Start the conversation.
With people in school. And we've done a lot of cool things, outreaches and stuff. And like we're always looking for help and volunteers. And
so reach out, you guys.
Yeah. And if like we've helped sponsor people to treatment centers. And we help people find mental health, like treatment, therapy, help get their medications right. There's also a stigma with medication. Yeah. With taking meds. Yeah. So if you can reach out to me, Laisha at fthestigma.com. That's LAISHA at fthestigma.com.
Well, thanks for being a voice in this community.
Yeah, of course.
You're rad.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you for having me on
Fuck
the podcast.
the stigma, you guys. Fuck the stigma. All right. We'll see you next time.
Bye.